As I mentioned at the beginning of Mass, I was in pilgrimage in Lourdes during the week. On the Wednesday morning, we trod the pathways of the Stations of the Cross. We dialogued as we journeyed, linking faith and life, joys and tears. It was striking as we meditated how easily pilgrims clearly identified with the image of carrying a cross. As we pondered Jesus as helpless and crushed, pilgrims had no difficulties in seeing parallels with their own lives. In the reading from St. Paul to Philemon, which Brian read, we learned that Paul is in prison, carrying a heavy load for being an animated follower of Jesus. In the reading from the Book of Wisdom, which Benedict read for us, we heard about the trials and tribulations of trying to discern the will of God. Today, there also remains a cost in being a disciple of Jesus. I remember the story of a Pentecostal pastor called Noe, who lives in the USA, who was arrested and jailed, and on being freed, seeing the images of his children and wife rushing to him with them all crying. The pictures were achingly beautiful. Pastor Noe entered the USA as a child at the age of 13, fleeing violence in Guatemala. Married to a US citizen, he had never committed a crime other than being illegal in the country. He went for a routine medical check and found himself arrested. He had developed a profile as an effective Christian pastor, and this led to him being held for 59 days until he was unexpectedly and suddenly released. The pastor spoke movingly of how even in a time of deepest trial for him and his family, he didn't stop being a pastor to other vulnerable people. Even in the detention center, he described how God was with me. And from the first moment that he stepped foot in the facility, the following day, he began to hold services inside the detention center. Another striking life story from this week is that of the Irish artist-singer Loa. Initially, on leaving school, she became a pharmacist and enjoyed the stability that this gave her. But even though she liked her job, she wasn't happy. Loa says, I started to feel a real heaviness, the heaviness of the soul. I loved my job and the people, so that the heaviness was jarring, she said. The heaviness mirrored what Loa encountered at school. She says, I was bullied in school as a teenager, and it's really amazing to be bullied because it's what everyone fears: public humiliation and scorn. When it happens, it is as horrible as you think it's going to be, and there is no escaping the horror of that ostracization. In recent years, amidst the fullness of her acclaimed life as a singer, Loa has re-engaged with Christian faith. She describes talking about this as a huge act of vulnerability, given the potential for a hostile reaction from her fans and the public at large. A few years ago, Loa found herself feeling, I don't think I can do life anymore without a raft. She found herself going back to Christ. During COVID-19, she was invited to a weekly online prayer group. Lola says it's just literally really chill, where a bunch of us meet and pray for each other and discuss our challenges and how we can apply biblical principles to our life. It's like, who am I? Lola describes this new phase in her life as like this. Gosh, if I really believe this, that I am so loved by the divine creator, why would I ever care what anyone thinks of me? Like, why would I even trust an opinion other than the one that made me? It starts to seem absurd to even consider looking for your approval from anyone else. Midweek, I read an article about families who homeschool their children. The families described the initial skepticism of their relatives. One couple asserted, "We don't just do things because it's what everyone else is doing." The convictions of these parents prompted me to think that in a world extremely hostile to faith and religion, a similar determined conviction is needed about being a disciple of Christ. Life brings moments when we feel crushed. We can often experience a heaviness of the soul. Opting to follow Jesus often leaves our families bewildered and confused. Yet going back again and again to Christ helps lift the heaviness of the soul. It doesn't eliminate pain, but rather offers a raft to stay afloat on the waves of life. Amen.